Alrighty. Good evening, everyone. So glad you can make it. My name is Royce Cook, and I'm president of the South Central Texas chapter for STC. Tonight, we're having Jack Molisani present Get That Interview, How to Beat the Dreaded Applicant Tracking System. So we'll have Jack introduce himself, give his presentation, and if we have time at the end, allow for some questions and commentary. So Jack, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'll just share my screen first and then go from there.
Absolutely.
You need to enable screen sharing, however. So while you're doing that, I'm Jack Molisani. I am the president of ProSpring Technical Staffing. It's a staffing agency that specializes in content professionals. I also produced the LavaCon conference on content strategy, and we're going to be in San Diego in a week. And then I also wrote a book that hit number 5 on Amazon's career and bestseller list called Be the Captain of Your Career, A New Approach to Career Planning and Advancement. Now, the sad news is the first printing is sold out. And the good news is we're doing a second edition that should be hitting bookstores soon. All right. Okay, can you see my screen?
Good to go.
All right. Now,
Yes.
for some reason, the chat window went away. So will somebody monitor the chat window for questions for me?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. So, ground rules and warnings. This is not sit and listen to Jack talk for 45 minutes. This is group participation. When we meet in person, I tend to throw chocolate to people who participate, but I do encourage you to ask questions and add comments of your own. Next disclaimer, anything I say is just my opinion. Try it and see if it works for you. What works for Royce may not work for Jamie. Again, try it. If it works, it doesn't. Keep it. If it doesn't, throw it out the window. And there's certain things in here that I'll present opposing or contrasting points of view. And then finally, let's just call this a parable. I believe that in some cultures, believe that to attempt perfection is to anger the gods. So artists in those cultures purposely leave a little imperfection in any art they create. So if you find any typos in here tonight, just not angering the gods. All right. So we're talking about beating the dreaded applicant tracking system. So the first thing we'll do is define what is an applicant tracking system. Talk a little bit about how to avoid using applicant tracking systems and how, if you absolutely must, how to work with that ATS. And your goal then is to get the next step, which is an interview. Applicant tracking systems started out just as it sounds, to track where a job applicant was in the hiring process. It was just a way to accept, store, and track resumes and submissions. They started at PC-based, eventually went to web-based as apps evolved. And for years, if not decades, ATSs were a very benign tool that companies used to track where the person is. However, all that changed with mobile. Suddenly, applicants could create a profile on Indeed.com or some other website and go apply, 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 apply. So companies started receiving hundreds, literally hundreds of resumes from job applicants a day, most of whom were not qualified. I just did a podcast with Bill Swallow from Scriptorium, and he mentioned how he had once posted a job opening for a engineering developer to help develop a content management system. And he put in that experience with Java as a plus. And he started getting resumes from baristas, right? So to counter this flood of non-qualified applicants, companies started adding AI into their ATSs to weed out the non-qualified candidates. And they started by comparing the job requirements to your resume. And they would look for first very specific keywords. But then as the AI got more sophisticated, they also started comparing the job description to your resume. And then I mentioned that now you have ATS that's automatically rejecting resumes, but then you also have job sites like Indeed, or ZipRecruiter, we could say anytime the word writer appears, automatically submit my resume. So now you have AI submitting resumes automatically, AIs rejecting them automatically. Madness. It's like, here comes Skynet, right? So it then ranks you, the ATS ranks you on how well it thinks you match the job description. The problem is most of the time it's wrong. And only that maybe one, because remember, they're getting hundreds of resumes a day. They're only letting in the top 1%, 2% of the way the ATS thinks you match. So what are you going to do? First thing I tell people is stop applying for jobs through applicant tracking systems, right? I personally know 5 people in the San Diego area that got new jobs last year through personal referrals, and they got 0 interviews applying for jobs online. 0, right? Despite the fact they were all qualified candidates. 0. So first thing I tell people is stop using ATS and stop applying for jobs through websites. Let's talk a little bit about how best to do that. And eventually we'll talk about how to beat it if you bust. So the best way to beat an ATS is not use one at all. It's a bazillion times more effective to get a job through a personal referral than it is to emailing your resume to jobs@blackholenevertobeheardfromagain.com or applying through a website. So start building your professional network now before you need it. Royce, any questions or comments in the chat window yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, good. Let's carry on. Your connections, such as on LinkedIn or here in the STC community, which is even better, are your most valuable asset for job hunting. So if there was ever a motivation to volunteer in your local STC chapter, this is it, right? Because I'm involved in the STC, if a company comes to me needing a documentation manager in Milwaukee, I think Molly Barrett, right? If they, need a tech writer in South Central Texas, Royce Cook, right? That's how I know and place most of my candidates is because I know people. I've met them. I've met them at the summit. I've met them speaking. I met them volunteering on the Community Action Committee. Oh, and I get a chat window notification. Yay. All right. Oh, Jamie, who is my person for whom I volunteer, wholeheartedly agrees. Volunteering is a great way to know other people, right? And I happen to be president of the Los Angeles chapter and other chapters, past presidents. I'll give you another example. It's a little tangential, but germane. When I was president of Orange County STC, there was a new member who wanted to transition from environmental engineering into tech writing. So she volunteered to be the newsletter editor, Teresa Vigianis. And every time they published the newsletter, her name was on it as an editor and a writer. Somebody read the newsletter, liked it so much, they offered her a job just because she volunteered to be the newsletter editor. All right. So I have very tangible examples of how being active in your STC chapter or whatever communities you belong will help you find your next job. All right, let's carry on. And I am moving the chat window over here so I can see it. All right. All right, so I already gave you that rant. Volunteering at meetups is also a good place to network with professionals. Now, another thing I tell people is truthfully, especially if you're STC is a great place to network for a job, especially if you're looking for a full-time staff position. But say you have your own technical writing practice or you're a contractor, right? Well, most of the people at the STC already have jobs. They may not need tech writer. So go to meetups or other groups for like C++ programmers or Java programmers or network engineers, because they're the people that are building things that need to be documented. So while it's easy, especially if you're an introvert, just to go to an STC meeting and sit in a corner, that doesn't help future job security. So at one point, and this is not in the slides, that I recommend back up a little bit. 2 months ago, 2 issues ago in Intercom, I um I was one of the contributors talking about soft skills, and in that, I recommend people go to Toastmasters, learn public speaking, and to take an improv comedy class. Like, whose line is it, anyways? What I've discovered, having studied improv myself, is that a lot of people say, "Oh, I could never think fast enough to do improv," which is ironic because the first thing they teach you is stop thinking. Because if you're thinking about what you're going to say next, you're not listening to your partner. So you really gain active listening skills. And the basic principle behind improv is yes and, where they give you something and you add to it. And a classic example I use is um, you could pantomime being on a tightrope and go, "Daddy, I'm scared," right? And you could come back with, "Be careful, Billy, those alligators look hungry." Whatever they give you, add to it. So I've discovered that, having studied improv, I've never been thrown off by a question I wasn't expecting, or some being in a situation I wasn't expecting, because I'm active listening and then I can respond. Plus, I also found that, have you ever been in a meeting and someone made a suggestion that you thought was absolutely ridiculous? So instead of going, "God, that's stupid," you could go, "Oh, yes, we could also do this," and throw out an idea of your own, right? All because I've studied improv speaking and improv and public speaking. Okay. So let's carry on. So speak at events, right? Be the guest speaker at events like this. This is how I stay visible, right? I never know if somebody needs to hire a contract technical writer, who are they going to call? Me, right? Because they know me. Works both ways. Even better, speak at conferences, right? Um, I'll give you another example. We'll talk more later on in the slides about being so visible, companies ask you to work for them, like they did Teresa, where I had a job. It, it was for a documentation manager, and I knew the director of the company. And she was looking for someone who was very forward looking, because this was several decade or so, where online help was changing, web help was changing. There were a lot of changes coming down the pipe, and she wanted someone forward looking. And so I had someone apply for the job. So I Google searched this person's name and found zero hits. And it was a fairly uncommon name. And I'm going, how could you profess to be a leader in your industry and have no hits? You've never spoken at a chapter meeting. This was for tech writers, remember. You're not an associate fellow of the society. You've never spoken at a conference. How how could I think of you as a leader in your industry, which is what my client was looking for? And to the point where I didn't even consider. And I asked the manager later, and she goes, "Yeah, I wouldn't have hired her anyways." So someone pointed out, well, maybe she recently got married and changed her name. True, I didn't think about that at the moment. Um, but this is why a lot of people, if they get married, hyphenate their last name. So if you've, you know, developed what's what I'm looking for, a body of work under your previous name, you still want to be found, even though you change your name. Okay, so be visible. Again, both it's getting back pre and post COVID to local meetups or STC meetings. What I'm finding is a lot of communities, both in STC and not, are keeping their programs virtual, like we're doing tonight. But every other month they meet as a mixer at like a beer hall or a beer garden or a bar or someplace. So you still get your face-to-face networking time in, but you don't have to bring in a screen, a projector, and all that for the program. So do keep in the face-to-face networking when you can. In the meantime, build your social media networks. LinkedIn is a great place. At the end of this presentation, I'll ask you to connect with me on LinkedIn. Again, the first place I'm going to look for someone when I have a job opening are the people my first degree connections and the people I know personally. Then groups. There are groups on LinkedIn, on Facebook for technical writing, content strategy, user experience. And again, it's one thing to belong to a group and lurk, but that doesn't help me find you when I have a job opening. So participate, ask questions, answer questions. I actually got admonished once for being in a group and not participating. And the owner of the group said that I'm so well known throughout the STC that by not participating in her group, she felt snubbed, that I was above it all or something. And we talked it out and realized, okay, I can't just lurk, I have to participate. But I want to participate too. Again, I try to practice what I preach, right? So as much as a lot of tech writers are introverts, there are times when you have to overcome that, and the improv comedy will help. On a related note, I mentioned I preach at a conference, and we actually will give business cards, print business cards for people who don't have them, just to facilitate the networking. Well, one year, I decided to do speed networking. All you had to do is sit down at a table, hand out your card going, hi, I'm Jack from IBM. Hi, I'm Jack from IBM. And you're right. 10 minutes later, you go to the new table and do the same thing. How hard could this be, right? Apparently, I so traumatized the introverts that on the post-conference survey, what they asked for was a quiet room with puppies. So ever since then, we've brought in therapy dogs just so the introverts could recharge their batteries after networking over lunch, right? And because we had a llama in LavaCon when we were virtual, now that we're back to in person, we're bringing in a therapy llama on the second day of the conference this year. Okay, so Cindy says, please remember STC can be your tribe. We really want to help each other. Absolutely, I agree with that 100%. Regarding not speaking up in groups, what if you're not doing so to give others a chance to talk? Lord knows I am the first person to go, oh, Mr. Carter, call on me, right? And in fact, when I discovered in my improv group, I was always the first to stand up, right? When I noticed I was doing that, I would purposely wait and let somebody else take the lead, let them practice leading. And I do that in my company as well in other organizations. I'm not saying don't talk all the time. I'm also saying don't say nothing all the time. All right. Especially if the discussion is about something that you have something to say, right? So it's a balance between hogging the attention, having the talking stick, and not saying anything at all, right? I own the content strategy group on LinkedIn. I think we have 40,000 people who are subscribed. Only about 1,100 of that 40,000, maybe I think less than that, actively participate throughout the year. So there are 39,000 people who just sit there, either don't visit it once they join or just lurk. So Jamie says, having attended LavaCon last year, I love the therapy dogs, despite being a cat person. Oh, thank you, Jamie. Which group on LinkedIn? Content Strategy is the one I own. It's called Enterprise Content Strategy. All right, let's carry on. Let your network know you're looking. All right. This can be embarrassing. People may not want you to do that. LinkedIn makes it easy, by the way. You could just say open to work to put the little swoosh on your photo. But I'm a little more brazen than that. I would call people, go, hey, I'm looking for a job. Do you have any openings? Another story I tell. When I was a contract tech writer in Orange County, looking for my next gig, I decided I was going to write an article for my local newsletter on hiring trends in Orange County. And I picked the top 10 companies I'd want to work at. And I called the documentation managers there going, hi, I'm writing an article for the STC. May I interview you? Every one of them said yes. I asked, so what do you look for in a tech writer? What tools does you use at your company? What kind of documentation do you write? Are you hiring this year? When are you hiring? What are you looking for? By the end of this exercise, I knew who was hiring, when they were hiring, and what they were looking for, or for what were they looking for, you grammarians, right? I did write the article. right? And then I also got to ask him, would you like me to send you a copy of the article when it's published? Yes, please. What's your email address? I now had the personal email address of all the hiring managers in Orange County. I did send the article, and then I said, oh, by the way, my contract is ending soon. May I send you my resume? Sure. Oh my God. This is a great example of being proactive in your job search, not just sitting back and applying for jobs through applicant tracking systems in the hopes that someday someone somewhere will reply. Okay. I've been accused of many things in my career. Quiet and victim are not two of them. All right. Now, here's another interesting data. A majority of job openings are never posted on the web. They're filled through networking and personal referrals. So, okay, I'm going to open this. This is a question I want somebody to answer. Why do you think companies don't post the jobs on the web when they have one? Don't make me call on you. I will. Jamie, why do you think a lot of companies don't post jobs on the web when they have them?
Honestly, in some instances, it's because they already have an internal candidate in mind.
That is a reason. Another reason is because they get hundreds of resumes that are not qualified and don't want to wade through hundreds of non-qualified candidates. Okay, which brings us to, I think, the next slide. It is. Look at this. I've given this before. All right. Many companies offer their employees a bonus for finding or referring candidates for opening jobs. It's just faster and cheaper than paying to post them on Dice, Monster, or Indeed, right? So again, that gives you a reason why to ask someone in your network if they will pass you on. Somebody said, needing work is like toothaches. Everyone has experience, and there's nothing to be embarrassed about, right? I would agree with that as well. So don't hesitate to ask somebody in your network to pass your resume on to the hiring manager. They may get a bonus for doing so, right? So how do you find people to ask to give your resume? First thing, STC. If I know someone who works at John Deere Tractor, I could call. I don't know where Robert works, but I go, hey, Robert, I see you have an opening in your, the company at which you're working. Can you pass my resume on either to the hiring manager or someone in HR, right? If nothing else, you can find another tech writer who works at John Deere Tractor on LinkedIn and say, hey, I see you working at the John Deere facility in Pacoima. If I send you my resume for this opening, will you pass it on? Right. If nothing else, you can find the documentation manager at that office and ask them, because I guarantee you they're probably on LinkedIn. And if nothing else, a recruiter at John Deere Tractor is on LinkedIn because they use LinkedIn to recruit. Right. And I've got a slide on this, but I'll just tell you now because we're there. So you could reach out to a recruiter at John Deere Tractor and say, hey, I see you have an opening for a technical writer. May I send you my resume? They'll do one of like three things. They'll go, yes, please. Here's my email address. They'll not respond at all because maybe they didn't see the message. Or they'll say, hey, no, go ahead and apply online, but I'll keep an eye open for the application. Even if the ATS rejects you, now you have a human can then pick your email out of the not qualified bin and actually read it. Okay. Cindy says, I'm pretty amused that companies implement an ATS, but then don't use it because of candidate quality. Or they are, yeah, agreed. Okay, so we talked about that already. I already talked. Rarely do companies list their HR contacts on their website. I've never, maybe once I've seen in the 30 years I've been doing this. Because they just don't want to be spam. But 99% again have recruiters have LinkedIn accounts. Even if it just says recruiter at John Deere Tractor, at least you know they're a recruiter. What do you have to lose? They're not calling you. What do you think they're going to do? Not call you more? So take that risk. Okay, we talked about that already. And we talked about that. And I mentioned that as well. All right. Okay. So I touched on this a little bit, but it's so important that I want to expand a little bit more. Another option is to be so visible as an expert that people want to hire you, right? For a long time, um, Sharon Burton was known as the RoboHelp goddess. Um, I think she gave herself that moniker, but she was the go-to person to talk about RoboHelp. She knew it inside and out, and she spoke often. And and this, I'll give you another story, absolutely true story, but it illustrates the point I'm trying to make on this slide. Joe Walensky used to run the Win Writers conference about online help decades ago. It has since morphed into Writers UA. Um, but at 1 year, and this was back when I was fairly new to tech writing, um, but I found I really enjoyed online help at the time. And Joe had a panel discussion at his conference where four experts, um, I don't know if you've ever looked at the online help for WinZip, but it is the worst online help in the history of mankind. Oh my God, the engineer clearly wrote it and just added more and added more. And so the exercise was to decompile the online help for WinHelp, fix it so it was more usable, recompile it, and then show your before and after. What did you fix and why? And I went, hey, Joe, can I be on that panel? He said, sure. The other people on the panel were Scott Pagan, Joe Walensky, Dawn Stevens. These people wrote the book on online help, and me, right? No one who knew who I was, but by positioning myself on the same panel as Scott Pagan, Joe Walensky, Dawn Stevens, I was positioning myself as an expert in my field. And then not only that, a copy of that program, the printed program, went into my portfolio. And I could tell people when I was interviewing, I was on a panel with Scott Pagan, Joe Walensky, and Dawn Stevens, because I'm an expert in my field, right? To the level to which you've been trained. This is another example of you being proactive in your career development. So now we're going past applying for a job, right? So the scope is getting a little bit. We're looking into the future, going, I want to be marketable, right? So one, if I'm tired of my job and I want a new one, I want options to go. If I get downsized in a recession or a government furlough, I want options. I want to know people. Or on the career path that I want to take 5, 10 years from now, I want people coming to me offering me jobs, not applying for jobs. So that takes not constant work, but and it's not an accident. It's things that you can take step by step to get to where you want to go. And we're doing okay in time, so I'm going to stop and give another Jack analogy. One of my favorite science fiction books is called The Chronicles of Amber. And in this book, the 9 princes of Amber have the ability to move between universes. And the author proposed there were an infinite number of universes. So say he wanted to go from the beach to the mountains or skiing. You just don't poof, dematerialize at the beach and poof, rematerialize at the ski slope. You start walking and you go, okay, around the next turn, there's going to be a boulder, and around the next turn is a boulder. And over this next hill, the temperature is going to drop, and the temperature drops, right? And then around the next thing, it's going to start snowing. And eventually he ends up at the ski slope, right? By shifting universes to get where he wants to go. I go, what a perfect career analogy. If you're not happy where you are, or if there's someplace you want to be, start where you are, take out what you don't want, add what you do want, and eventually you're going to get to where you want to be. Okay, highly recommend the book. Somebody write that in the chat window. The Chronicles of Amber, by Roger Zelazny. And if someone could grab the Amazon link to that book and drop it in, that would be neato keen. Okay. See all these great Jack stories you get that aren't on the slides that you don't get by just reading the slides afterwards. So let's continue. Again, be visible, speak at conferences, write articles, write for Intercom magazine, write for your local newsletter if you have one. For years, I had a quarterly column in Intercom on job hunting, right? Guess how I got it? At the time, Liz Poland was the editor. I go, hey, Liz, can I have a column? She goes, sure, on what? I go, job hunting. She goes, okay. See how hard that was? Right? Reach out to newsletter editor and go, what are your upcoming issues for which you need articles? Oh, okay, I can talk about project management. May I submit an article on project management? Sure. They're constantly looking for material. right? Again, no one's going to pick up the phone and call Erica saying, hey, Erica, would you please write an article for me? It doesn't work like that. You have to call them. Okay, thank you. Let's continue. Be visible in a pro-survival professional way. Being known for drinking out of a bong on the beach during spring break is not what I'm talking about. Okay, so I've been banging the drum about avoiding applicant tracking systems, There are times when you just can't avoid it and you must apply it for the job via the website. So let's talk a little bit about this. All right. There are many, many websites on how to beat an ATS when applying for jobs. So despite notice the title of the session is not how to apply for a job through an ATS. It's how to beat the ATS, and how to beat it is by not using it at all. That said, I will share with you what I have learned and where you can find more information if you want it. It's in my opinion that a resume is just a vehicle that shows that you match what the reader's looking for, right? Even if the reader is an applicant tracking system with an AI. So the main strategy for getting past the ATS is to make your resume look as much like the job posting as possible. You're going to Frankenstein your resume that no human in their right mind would hire you, but the ATS will. The title of your resume and in your current and previous jobs must match the job posting exactly. It's in all red and italics. Can I get more emphasis on this? And I'll give you a real life example. A friend of mine was a UX UI developer, user experience, user interface, UX UI developer, applying for a job for a UX UI developer and wasn't getting interviews. So I'll talk a little bit more about this. There are websites out there where you can post your resume and post the job description, and it will tell you how well an ATS will rank you. And what she discovered was the job was a UI UX developer, but her resume said UX UI developer. And an ATS said that's not a match and kicked her out. Now, any human can see that UX UI and UI UX are the exact same thing. An ATS can't, right? You know, the whole thing about artificial intelligence, it's like an oxymoron. It's not. They're not intelligent. They're not, right? So there's a comment. One way to become an expert is learning a little about an industry that is still developing. I agree. For example, insurance for environmental damage is new. Once you become known expert in that trend, you can also say, oh, I'm an expert in ... I cannot agree with you more. I'll see your example and raise you one. When XML, extensible markup language, first came out, it was just standard. No one had coded in XML yet. It was just a standard that was published, right? So, what was her name? Who's the tech writer that lives out in Arizona? I'll think of it in a second. She taught herself XML, wrote a book on XML, and became a leading expert in XML just because she read the standard before anyone else did and taught it to herself and wrote a book. And suddenly she's the XML standard. Christine, I could not agree with you more.
Do you mean Sarah O'Keefe?
No, not Sarah O'Keefe. Sarah O'Keefe lives in South Carolina somewhere. She's the person that's got the big iron monkey in her backyard that she salvaged from a putt-putt golf place. Oh, this is going to bother me.
Oh my gosh.
At the end, I will call somebody, or you know what? I'll text them right now. This is going to bother me to the end of days. Start chat. Kit Brown. Text. What's the name of our dear friend that has a monkey in her backyard? Send. Okay. That way, hopefully, we'll get an answer before the end of the presentation. Okay, UI UX developer, UX UI developer. It's that stupid. If the job is senior information, by golly, you are a senior information engineer. I believe that a resume should show what you did, not what you were called. I know people whose title is technical staff 3. That will not help you get a job. Even though you were a tech writer, I don't care what your title was. I want to know what you did. If you were a senior information engineer, by golly, call yourself a senior information engineer. If that's what they are looking for, if that's what they are calling the job. So you have to do that to get past the ATS. Now, if you get an interview, you can bring in your clean resume with your actual title on it. If you get a job offer and they make you fill out a job application where it says title, that's where you put your actual title. So if they do a job search verification, it'll match. But your job is not to be exact. Your job is to beat the ATS. And the only way you're going to do that is using their terminology in your resume. All right. Again, this is a reason why not to use ATSs. If you don't like fibbing on your resume by calling yourself a different title, then you're not going to do well with ATSs. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just saying how it is, not how it should be. And I've told you the UX UI design story already. Brenda Huttner. Brenda Huttner is the person who's got the big monkey in her backyard. I got it before she told me. Okay. Yeah, just to let you know, they were tearing down a putt-putt golf in her neighborhood, and she liked the monkey so much that she had a crane come in and put it in her backyard. It's still there. I bet you could Google it and you could find it. All right. Make sure your resume shows that you match the requirement using their exact wording. The AI will also compare your job duties to your resume, so make sure your resume also shows what you've done using their exact wording. There are websites where you can paste the job posting in your resume, and it'll tell you how well you score. Just search the internet for, is my resume ATS friendly to find one. Now, I know ZipRecruiter, which is not my favorite website, they have one of these, right? So if you're applying for a job through ZipRecruiter, you might want to use your tool to see if you match before you submit your application. Okay. More notes. Oh, I just told you that one. So what do you do if you haven't done or don't have one of the requirements? Figure out a way to work in a truthful statement, such as if you I just made these words up. Say you must have experience with Ahrefs. I mean Buzzmo. Well, I don't have experience with Ahrefs, but I have a content audit tool similar to Buzzmo. See, it still got the word in. You know, it got content audit in. That might be close enough to get you the interview. Another thing to consider, AIs can't parse long sentences, so use short sentences, or better yet, short phrases. Keep verbs and direct objects in close proximity, such as wrote training materials, not wrote a variety of content for end users and stakeholders, including installation guides, user manuals, SOPs, and training materials. The AI would never parse that sentence to say you've written training materials, right? Someone once said, write like a caveman. Well, the president of ZipRecruiter wrote a book, and in his book, he talked about ATSs, and he says, write like a caveman. I think it's derogatory to both cavemen and men in general. So the point is a good point, though. Gert, ugh, Hulk, smash. Wrote training materials, right? Verb, object, period. You're trying to show that you match exactly what they're looking for using their words. Again, this is why I don't apply for jobs through ATSs. It's too much work. AIs can't parse tables and text boxes. So if you got this pretty little matrix in your resume, an ATS can't read that. It can't read icons. I've seen people who put their phone number in as a graphic. They can't read graphics. They can't read a header and a footer in a Word document. So if you buried your contact information in the header or the footer and you're applying for a job using a Word doc, it's never going to find you. It's that bad. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I really do. But the more you know, like the more you know, the better your chances of getting an interview if you're forced to apply for a job through an ATS, which you won't because you've seen this presentation. Make your resume as plain as possible. Nothing fancy. You're trying to get past an AI, not get someone's attention with a pretty resume. Save that for the interview. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's pretty, yeah, man, we've got 40 minutes. We're doing good. So let's open the floor to questions. And truthfully, it doesn't just have to be about ATSs. You've got a professional recruiter that you can ask questions to. I'll see if I can answer them. If not, I will research it and get back to you. By the way, I don't know if we said this in the promotion of tonight's event, but we are going to give away free entrance to a virtual entrance to LavaCon as a door prize. So the way we're going to do that is I'm going to get a random number generator and pick a number one, however many people are on the call, and they're going to win it. We'll come back to Q&A for a second. Let's summarize, and then I'll take questions as they come in. ATSs compare your resume to the job requirements and the job description, and will reject you if it thinks you're not a good match. So stop applying for jobs through ATSs. Get a personal referral, even if it's a stranger. And all else fails, format your resume to beat the dreaded applicant tracking system at its own game. Recommended reading. Again, there was a lot of bad information in ZipRecruiter's book. For example, it says you must be one of the first 12 people in the first 20 minutes a job goes up to get the job. I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a second. There's a lot of stuff he says in the book that I don't believe. But he does have an excellent chapter on beating the applicant tracking system. So take it with a grain of salt. Pamela Patterson wrote a whole book on how to beat the applicant tracking system. It's available as an ebook on Amazon. I recommend that. And then I recommend you connect with me on LinkedIn, because when I have a job opening, that's where I look for jobs. Okay. So let's go back to questions. Christine says, I revised my resume after speaking with a recruiter. I'm going to come off screen sharing just so I can see y'all more. All right. I revised my resume after speaking with a recruiter, so my resume reflected the buzzwords she used. I brought it with me to my interview, for which I had a referral, of course. Okay, so at the top of this presentation, I said, take what I say. If it works, keep it. If it doesn't, throw it out the window, right? So if you're not getting a job through an ATS, try a different way. Another thing I tell people is do A/B testing, right? Take your version of your resume and maybe something that I've suggested you change as a recruiter, and see which one gets you more interviews. If that's what I call FBC, fully buzzword compliant, right? But it's interesting, as a recruiter, I can tell when someone else has written your resume for you. I can just tell. And I believe that a resume, one, should be a personal communication from you to the hiring manager, right? And it's a sample of your work. So somebody else writing it for you, now I don't know how good a writer you are. So that's, again, my opinion. Margaret, I ran into that this week. I got rid of headers a long time ago. Don't let the recruiter edit your resume without checking it when they finish it. Absolutely. I actually tell recruiters, you are not allowed to edit my resume at all. Because a lot of times they'll put their logo in it, and then it throws off all the pagination. I don't know. No. If you want me to put your logo in my resume, give me your logo. I will drop it in. No. Just say no. Okay, good. Other questions, comments, war stories?
I have a question. Do
Yes.
you prefer receiving resumes as Word docs or PDFs, or that's always something I'm curious about?
All right. How I prefer and how you should are two different things. If you send me a Word doc, the very first thing I'm going to do is turn on hidden characters. I can't tell you how many people have justified their date range by going space, right? No, tab stop, tab, right aligned, right? So you are giving me ammunition with which to reject you by giving me a Word document. 2, Word has metadata in it. It's got information about you, how long you've been editing it, who else has edited this document, what printer you printed it on, did you copy it on a USB drive? It's all in there. PDF it. Creating a PDF strips out all the metadata, and it makes it harder for me to tell if you're using spaces versus tabs. But then again, a lot of these ATSs want you to copy a text version of your resume into the window and maybe attach a formatted version. Now we're back to the days when we were doing headings by using all caps, right? And we create bulleted lists by going O period space. So yeah, we've gone full circle. All right. Cindy says, if I'm sending my resume to you, can I use fancy fonts? But if I have to use the ATS, maybe use Arial. Okay, I'm labeling this as my opinion. I don't like fancy fonts, right? Because one, a lot of fancy fonts are designed for being printed. If they have serifs, like Times, the reason Times or Times New Roman has serifs, if you don't know what a serif is, it's the little like letter T and a little down thingy at the end, and at the bottom, little thingy. When you're reading a newspaper, the serifs were designed to help your eye go from letter to letter and make it easier to read and print. 72 DPI in a monitor, you don't have enough dots to really render those serifs. So I always recommend just use a plain sans serif font, right? I know the default font is in Word is what is it in Word? I can't stand it.
Calibri?
Calibri. I hate Calibri. Use Arial. Just use it. I could almost say use Comic Sans just to see if anybody actually does it,
Oh my God.
but I
Okay.
won't because I'm being recorded. So I'm not going to say that. Yeah, if you're going to use a serif font, use it in your headings because they're big enough to actually write the serifs. But 99% of the time, people are reading your resume online or using electronically is probably a better word. So just stick with sans serif fonts. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Jack.
Sure. Accessibility note. Using all caps is hard for some people to read. They use word shapes to help them decode words. Yes, I agree with that. And since we all text now, I think you're yelling at me if you're using all caps. Yeah, don't do that. How do you work with someone who wants to find you a job but doesn't speak English well? Welcome to the world of overseas recruiters. Yeah, let's take that one first. I've been accused of being foreign born based on my name alone. I try not to make assumptions about people just based on where they are. But we as technical writers specialize, most of us, in the English language. And I wouldn't necessarily want someone who doesn't speak English well coaching me on how to find a job. There's so many recruiters out there. If you have a choice, I would go with someone who may be a little more familiar with what we do. But if they want to help, give them as much ammunition as you can. I did see a question earlier that I scrolled past and forgot to get back to. It's about putting keywords in your resume. If you remember, my definition of a resume is it's just a vehicle that shows that you match what the reader is looking for. So if I'm looking for a technical writer, senior technical writer, writing nuclear regulatory documentation and with a degree in applicable field, and I get a resume saying, Jamie Sagan, technical writer, summary, 10 plus years experience writing nuclear regulatory documentation with a degree in nuclear physics. It's exactly what I'm looking for. I pick up the phone call. I won't even read the rest of the resume. Are you available? How much is your rate? I will read the rest of the resume. The point being is you showed in one sentence that you matched what I was looking for. However, what do you do when you're posting your resume to Dice or Monster or Career Builder and you don't know what the reader's looking for, right? I still say do your normal resume and at the end say keywords and then list all the keywords. That way you're finding your resume is findable, but you're not trying to cram them into the middle of your resume and sound fully buzzword compliant. I'm totally fine with that. the trick is be findable, right? Good questions.
I have another question.
Go for it.
It's about maybe putting like really well-known software as like a technical skill, like putting Microsoft Word or putting Google Docs or putting like, if
Mhm.
you're a writer, that's expected. So maybe putting more advanced tools and software.
Yes, and I'll expand on your answer. I'm agreeing with you and adding to it. It's in my humble opinion that when someone's looking for you, they're looking for five things. One, what are you? Are you a writer? Are you a ditch digger? What are you? Two, how senior are you? Are you entry level, senior? Three, do you have the tools we use here? Right? If someone's doing structured authoring, they probably want someone who's done structured authoring, especially if you're a contractor, right? Same thing like we talked about FrameMaker earlier. If it's a 2-month contractor, I don't have time to teach you Frame. But if you're an entry level writer, yes, I would. Or do you have domain experience? Biotech companies want tech writers with biology backgrounds. Network companies want networking backgrounds. So, what are the things I tell people? And I just reminded myself to slow down. One of the things you can do is take a certificate in a field about what you want to write. So, take a class in network administration, take a class in database administration, take a class in Java programming. So that way, you in your own right, if they say, can you document Java APIs? You go, I've written Java APIs, right? Domain knowledge. And the fifth thing is, can I afford you? And the fifth thing is the only thing not in your resume to show that you match the first four. So yes, I agree with what you said 100%.
And even going to the can I afford you? How do you advise technical writers or content professionals to kind of advocate for a higher rate? What would they need, or what would their resume need to show for them to maybe advocate or negotiate for something higher?
Truthfully, that's a whole nother presentation that would take a good hour to cover. And I do, especially if you want to do a workshop. Let's talk about maybe us hosting a career makeover workshop that covers more than that. I have a whole session on workplace negotiation skills, building your brand, personal branding, all that goes into answering your question. I'll see if I can do it in the minute we have left.
Okay.
It gets back to that position yourself as an expert, right? I am not the cheapest writer on the block. I don't want to be the cheapest writer on the block. And it's up to me to communicate that. And I usually do it in the interview more than I do it in my resume, because I have a portfolio that I use when I'm interviewing. And I have a whole portfolio session where I basically say, this is not a sample of my work. It's a tool that I use to show an interviewer that I'm an expert in my field. I really have done what I say I've done, and I can solve their problems because I've already solved them from someone else. And that's how you get a better rate. It's by positioning yourself as an expert in your field. That's my short answer. Yep. And everyone, connect with me if you're not already connected me with on LinkedIn. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jack. And for any other questions that people may have, they can reach out to you on LinkedIn to ask.
Yes.